30 kids story time. I've got a really nice looking hat for the day. So I was thinking, what story should I tell? I'm 60 years old, and so being 60, I've had a lot of experiences. Some of them really good, and some not so good. I'm going to tell you a story. We used to live, if you've been watching, we used to live in town in Cumberland, Maryland. Up through my 5th grade, I went to Johnson Heights Elementary School up through 5th grade. And then between 5th and 6th grade, we moved from in town on Maple Street. We moved out of town down close to Pittsburgh Plate Glass Factory, and we were out in the country for the first time. I went from a city boy to a country boy, and I enjoyed it. We lived out of town for 3 years, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I lived in junior high, those junior high years out of town. And my older brother, he was 7 years older than me, and my dad, my older brother, and myself, and we all chipped in. My dad built a good-sized chicken coop, and they put up poles and fence and made a chicken yard and got all that ready. And then my brother ordered some little chicks, and I don't know who he ordered them from, but from southern states or something like that. But all I know is that suddenly there were little chicks, little yellow chicks showed up. And my brother collected all kinds. He began to collect and order all kinds. He had those chickens that were called hippie chickens. The feathers just covered their whole head. You could just see their little beak sticking out between their feathers. Most of the time you couldn't even see their eyes. I don't know how they even saw. Called hippie chickens. And so this was back in the early 70s. And so when my brother got those little peeps, he had to keep them. He kept them in this box and had a light, a couple little light bulbs, keep them warm. And he'd mix things up and feed those, and those little chicks began to grow. And if you're a country boy or a country girl, you know that lots of times when you order something like that, as they start to grow, you end up with more roosters maybe than you hoped for. Less hens and more roosters. And as they started to kind of show themselves as to what they were, my brother, he started to name different chickens, and they were his, and he fooled with them all the time. And great big, he got some white leghorn chickens, and the white leghorn roosters got to be pretty good size. And he called one of those roosters Pluto, and he was a big old rooster. And he called another one Champ. And later he told me the reason he called him Champ is because anytime those roosters got in a fight, Champ would always win. He was the champ, and so he called him Champ. Well, as those little roosters were first growing and getting some size to them, my brother would turn when they grew big enough that he got them out of the box and put them down in the chicken house, and they could roam along in the chicken yard, and he'd scatter corn and things like that for them. I thought it was so much fun. I'd go down there and watch the chickens, but I discovered if I ran along the outside of that fence, and it was about, I'm guessing, maybe 10, 15 yards. If I ran along the outside of that fence and kind of went like that, or as I was running, those little roosters would run along the inside of the fence. They acted like, man, if I could only get to him, I'd spur him, I'd fight him. And it was a lark. I loved it. And I'd go down there every day and just torment those roosters. And those roosters, all during that time, they grew bigger and bigger and bigger. It seems like, and I know things when you were a kid seemed bigger, but it seemed like that rooster was about that tall. I mean, he was about that tall. And I know he wasn't. But when you're a boy 10, 11 years old, those roosters the spurs start looking like they're about that long, and they're really not, but in your mind, you start thinking, woo. And I was still tormenting them, running alongside the outside of the fence, but they were on the inside. But I was really glad, as they grew, I was really glad they were on the inside of the fence. But as these chickens got bigger, my older brother started to let these chickens out in the yard. They would free roam all around our house and things like that. And I had to start being careful because Champ, I knew Champ, he was watching for me. There was more than one time he saw me outside, and he'd take off running, and I'd kind of run towards the house and be safe, and my brother would gather all the chickens up in the evening, put them back in, and he kind of chuckled. He watched Champ, and the way Champ, the other roosters seemed to forgive me in a sense, but Champ, he just kept an eye out for me. And one day I left the house and walked across the field towards the chicken yard, and the chickens were all out. And I asked my older brother, I said, "Where's Champ?" As I was approaching the chicken house. I said, "Where's Champ?" And he said, he's in the chicken house. And I don't know if my brother really thought he was in the chicken house or he was just saying, "Watch this." But about that time, on the backside of that chicken house, come Champ tearing around the corner, running right for me. He had spotted me, and now I was too far away from the house. And I began to run backwards. And if you've ever seen a boy running backwards that's scared to death, that was me. And I ran back across that field backwards, facing Champ. I was afraid to just turn and run because he was going to spur me. And so he was trying his best. He was had his neck all fluffed up and his wings out, and he was jumping at me, trying to spur me with his spurs. And I didn't want that old mean rooster spurring me. And I backed up and backed up. My heart was a-racing, pounding. Oh, my goodness, Champ's going to get me. I'm going to get in trouble for all those times I tormented him. He's going to get me. And about that time, I realized I was underneath the metal T-bar that was the clothesline pole. And I jumped up and held onto that bar and pulled my legs up as high as I could. And Champ was underneath me, trying to jump up and spur me. And he couldn't quite reach me, but I didn't know how long I could hang onto that pole and pull my legs up out of the way as he was trying to get me. And finally, in desperation, I put my leg down and I just kicked at him as hard as I could. And I connected with Champ and rolled him. Must have hit him in the head and rolled him there, and he jumped up and ran back towards the chicken house and never bothered me after that. Well, the truth is I never bothered him after that. We kind of came to an agreement. We made a truce. He wouldn't bother me, and I wouldn't bother him. Why did I tell you that story today? Well, there's a verse in the Bible that says, "Be sure your sin will find you out." You see, day after day after day, I went down there and tormented those chickens. And finally, my sin, it wasn't really the right thing to do, and my sin found me out one day. I learned my lesson, not to torment them after that. Lots of times you can be involved in something. Man, I had so much fun tormenting those chickens running along the outside of that fence. You see, the Bible, God says sin is fun for a season. Just for a while. You could have fun, but then it can all cave in on you. I'll tell you a story tomorrow about something that I used to be involved in when I was just a young boy. It's a sad thing. But one story at a time. So when the devil tempts you to get involved in things that aren't right, even if it looks like it'll be fun, just remember, be sure your sin will find you out. When your buddies are tempting you to throw rocks at that window in that house where no one lives, and you think it'll be fun, when the cops show up and you're in trouble for throwing rocks and putting windows out in the house, it won't be fun anymore. So be careful what you do. Choose the right thing. Have a good day.